Hello, this is Susan Runyan. I am responsible for talking about Chapter 17, which is terminating employees. This chapter really just talks about involuntary separation of an employee, doesn't have to do with retirement or those kinds of voluntary things. So in the involuntary termination, there's really two sets. There's an individual and then there's also a group, I guess. So on the individual side, things to remember were to make sure that you document opportunities to improve. So if you have an employee who needs help or assistance, or you're trying to coach them up, if you will, make sure that you're documenting those opportunities for improvement and putting those in their file so that when it does, or if it does develop into a termination situation, that you do have that documentation ready to go. The other thing is to make sure that you're following your progressive disciplinary policy and procedure. So work closely with human resources to make sure that you followed the policy to the letter, so that litigation doesn't develop after the fact. Then really it goes into the discussion of reduction of force and how kind of group things happen. So layoffs, acquisitions, re-engineering, we've all heard of that, nicely packaged into downsizing or right sizing or whatever they want to call it these days, but sometimes that happens in organizations. It's easy to, or easier, I guess, to justify looking at a certain set or group of people. There has to really be a policy in place prior to this, a policy for reduction of force. Most organizations have that, and typically then should obviously try to follow that when they have this instance come up. Really anything that a company can do prior to layoffs, so looking for voluntary early retirement, looking for people who are interested maybe in a separation and could alleviate some of that having to find someone in the organization. The other thing that you could do is do a hiring freeze so that you may not have any, if you don't fill a position, then maybe you don't have to lay someone else off. The other thing you can also do is immediately get rid of your temporary employees and then start to look at part-time employees first before full-time employees. So layoffs are certainly hard and never a good thing. It certainly messes with the dynamic of the organization. I know that we've had several of these layoffs. 2 times in the last year we've laid off where I work, and it causes unrest. The manager, the CEO, the boss, whatever, really needs to be visible and support the staff that are remaining. You can inadvertently lose good staff who feel that uneasy environment and kind of want to flee the insecurity if you're not out there really talking about the organization and how strong it is and that you've really worked hard and making it transparent why it is that you've made these decisions to lay off, ultimately one of the most difficult decisions that you probably have to ever make. The next part that it talks about then is unemployment compensation. There are many times I've heard in 14 years that someone is discharged for cause, so the organization thinks that they're technically not available for unemployment benefits. Really anybody, regardless of how or what the organization thinks, anybody can go apply. The only thing that it costs somebody to apply for unemployment benefits is truly the time that it takes for them to fill out the form. So they can, even if it's for cause or not for cause or because of an employment, a lack of performance issue, they were fired basically, or even if they quit, sometimes, the company will think, well, we did everything right, we documented it appropriately, there's no way they can get unemployment benefits, but it certainly can happen. Even if the company thinks that they can't get it, it's really not up to the company themselves. So have your documentation in place. You may have to defend it whether you believe it was for cause or not for cause. Most people I would think would go out and apply for unemployment compensation. So there was an entire section on unemployment. Make sure that you don't discuss things just as if you were the one being laid off or let go. You wouldn't want those things discussed. So certainly privacy is an issue. I'm trying to think what else. Certainly weigh the options for security, whether you think someone needs to be escorted out. Many times that's really, it might not be necessary based on the type of if you're not concerned about sabotage or some sort of vandalism maybe on the way out, or violence, they might not need to be escorted out. I have seen people fired over my 20 years in healthcare, and most of the time, 99% of the time, they are escorted out, and it causes a big ruckus. Makes people feel even more strange. Why did they get let go? Well, if they got let go really for performance issues, do they ultimately need a security guard to walk them out because they were late 4 times undocumented late and documented over time their attendance issues? I mean, is that really something that needs escorted out with security? Ultimately, it's up to your organization, but truly from a leadership standpoint, maybe think about that and kind of the view of the organization and how other people will view you if you really take that hard stance of security escorting a secretary out because she was late and violated the attendance policy. I'm not sure that that's the main reason that was developed, but also, at any time termination or that separation of employment, make sure that Human Resources is talking to that person about COBRA, about their opportunities for what's going to happen to their benefits. I mean, even of a layoff, there are compensation packages, severance packages that need to be discussed. What's going to happen to their vacation can they apply for unemployment compensation, or how do they go about doing that? So still having a good relationship even when you terminate somebody is really ultimately important for your organization. And like I talked about earlier, that whole survivor of the reduction, they can be overwhelmed and overworked, and they can feel that strain, and you may ultimately end up losing somebody if you're not out there visible and making sure that they're confident in your organization. Ultimately, follow your policy. Make sure that you're following a reduction in force policy and or a progressive disciplinary policy if it is for a layoff or termination. And then certainly making sure that you're working directly with Human Resources and not acting and making sure that it's an independent decision, that you're following a policy on why you selected the people that you did, and hopefully you can avoid litigation, but I would bet it's probably one of the highest litigated things next to obstetrical care in the healthcare organization. So, all right, everybody, that was my summary on Chapter 17, Employee Termination. Thanks so much.